that, guys. Hey! Hey!
Somewhere out here in the Badlands of Pakistan's northwestern frontier province, Osama bin Laden is still plotting against America. Indeed, there is no more fertile ground for the global jihad than this rugged terrain. Here, boys are indoctrinated from a young age. U.S. forces in neighboring Afghanistan remain a magnet for these young jihadists. The president himself has marked South Asia as the central battleground for the United States.
We see the potential duration of this struggle in al-Qaeda's gross distortions of Islam, their disrespect for human life, and their attempt to prey upon fear and hatred and prejudice. So the threat will not go away soon. Though we have had more success in eliminating al-Qaeda leaders in recent months than in recent years, they will continue to recruit and plot and exploit.
This Pakistani schoolmaster says that Taliban and al-Qaeda fighters arrive here on R&R from Afghanistan to instruct his students in religious diktats and battlefield tactics. As early as 2002, the U.S. government vowed to help Pakistan overhaul its often militant educational system. But war got in the way. More and more U.S. resources have been pumped into helping the Pakistani army fight a growing insurgency of its own. That insurgency feeds off of and helps to fuel the fighting in Afghanistan. In the country's northernmost province, Chitral, believed to be an al-Qaeda hideout, tribal leaders complain about the growing influence of radical religious schools.
Within 2 years, they're brainwashed, they're trained, their personality is totally different. The same way it goes to the madrasas. And if I send my child, or if you send your child, if anybody, any human being, send their child to those madrasas, they are brainwashed.
Education by rote is no doubt a hard bone to crack. Young boys are subjected to outlandish conspiracy theories and reasons to hate the United States. This militant leader, Muhammad Alam, says that the 9/11 attacks in the United States were orchestrated by Jewish Americans to provide a pretext for the U.S. invasion of South Asia. This shop sells DVDs of jihadis fighting wars against so-called infidels everywhere from Iraq to Chechnya to the West Bank. Across the border, Afghan Taliban leaders have taken a page out of al-Qaeda's propaganda playbook.
We have al-Qaeda working very closely hand in hand with the Taliban, sending in young men, insurgent fighters, with video cameras to fight the Americans and film every attack on the U.S. forces here in Afghanistan. Those videotapes are taken back into Pakistan and turned into propaganda materials, which are then in turn sent across the Islamic world to try to glean and gather more support for the struggle here against the Americans. In fact, they're used as recruitment tapes in small mosques, centers, secret quarters across the Islamic world.
Afghan governor and terrorism analyst Philip Smucker also covered the war with me in Afghanistan as a reporter.
3 years ago, Taliban were waging a jihad or a resistance against international forces or the government just for Afghanistan cause. They wanted their own government to be installed back. But now, with that close links with al-Qaeda, with that exchanges with Iraqi fighters, and with that support from Iran and Pakistani radical circles, now even Afghan Taliban have started to become global jihadists and global mujahideen, not only the mujahideen who fight in Afghanistan.
Longtime New York Times Afghanistan correspondent Carlotta Gall says that Taliban spokesmen are quick to reach out to journalists.
They're not available, their phone's switched off, they often come back. They always get their message out and they'll do the rounds. They won't just call the favored few. Once they know a journalist's number, they'll call him.
British writer Rory Stewart walked across most of Afghanistan on foot after the U.S.-led invasion. Based upon his experience, he authored the book Places in Between. He now leads the Turquoise Mountain Development Organization in Kabul. Stewart points out that the Taliban's propaganda is focused on highlighting the idea that Western powers want to destroy local culture and permanently occupy Afghanistan.
They're learning from the success of Al-Qaeda. They can cut videos which will jump quite happily from pictures of the Twin Towers through to black and white stills of the British in the 19th century, back to pictures of frat parties in New York, in order to give people the generic sense that what they're fighting for is cultural purity and honor against corruption and materialism.
The Taliban has little to offer Afghans, but its leaders can still point their finger at a growing U.S. military presence.
The only card that the Taliban really have to play is a card that we give them. It's the card of being able to present themselves as fighting against foreign occupation. The United States has been slow to realize this because, of course, the United States is itself a revolutionary country. It believes in freedom. It sees itself as an opponent of colonialism. It's very, very difficult for the United States to understand that many people around the world now perceive it as an imperial colonial power trying to occupy them, because that is not the intention of the United States.
U.S. strategy is adapting, however. The Obama administration's approach is aimed at isolating the Taliban and dividing Afghans from global-minded jihadists. The push is part of an overall American exit strategy and an implicit U.S. promise not to occupy Afghanistan. To this end, a surge of U.S. forces across the country is focused on institution building and developmental outreach. Yet even U.S. naval and Army engineers admit that the U.S. Provincial Reconstruction Teams, or PRTs, are often perceived as having ulterior motives.
Well, I think there's people that do say we have other reasons for building the roads, but as far as the PRT is concerned, it's always been about connecting the people with the government, with the commercial sectors, with healthcare and education. Unfortunately, because we are military, people see it as us trying to further our roads so we can push into areas and maybe fight with the insurgents.
Afghans are often perplexed by the disconnect of heavy weaponry employed to push small-scale economic and social development schemes.
For the construction of a new girls' school here in Malil, and they want to also pay for the completion of the boys' school. So I'd like him to guide us to the location of the boys' school, and then he could talk to us about where the girls' school should be constructed.
People are saying, looking at soldiers turning up, excuse me, you're telling me that you have flown 10,000 miles and you've turned up in my village in body armor, in a tank, and we're trying to kill you, and you're telling us that you've just come here to build a girls' school. I'm sorry, I don't believe it. So it's a little bit like the scene in Mars Attacks, where these green men from Mars are flying around in spaceships above the population saying, we come in peace, and start shooting up the population on the ground every time they say it.
In Afghanistan, it is still unclear if the U.S. can successfully stand up a credible government without being perceived itself as engaged in a regional power play. Indeed, projecting so-called soft power while using adequate military might can be a frustrating and self-defeating proposition. In my travels across the Islamic realm, I discovered again and again that perceptions matter a great deal. Allies and brothers can often be falsely perceived as enemies. President Obama has pledged to fight against terrorism, but also for the rights of the oppressed. Yet Muslims still often see America as an oppressor and as an occupier. But as I also discovered, trouble in one part of the Islamic realm bears upon American peace efforts across the board. President Obama has articulated America's goodwill and defined a new course of action. To this end, he has committed American blood and treasure. Whether peace will be his reward, however, is far from certain.
Come on and look at that, guys. Hey!